Hi, Kat.
Hi, Kaylee. Hi, Harold.
Hey, how you doing, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. Hey, I'm gonna be on this picture.
Right?
Kaylee?
Say that again, Harold.
Hey, I thought I was hidden here.
So your screen's not on. I added you because I hadn't seen you register yet, so I just added you as a panelist because I knew you were gonna want to be on. So, but as long as you don't turn your camera on, then you're fine.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because I'm sporting a 1967 Afro.
No worries. Okay. Hi, Doria.
Hello.
Okay, so it is 2:30. I have not started broadcasting yet because it wants to be all set up. Okay.
The crazy hair. In the time of COVID, hair is crazy.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and start broadcasting. Hopefully that will open up and other people will be able to get in who maybe were not able to use their access link. So just a heads up, in 3, 2, 1, I am broadcasting live. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for joining. We will let more people hop on before we get started. Okay. I'm still searching for a few people who are supposed to be joining us, and I think maybe lost at the moment. But Kat, if you want to get started.
Sure. So I can't, okay, so the slides are up. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the second chapter of the Equitable Development Learning Community webinar. And I'm going to make a few short remarks to start, and then hand it off to Taj James, who will moderate for our session. Thank you, Kaylee, for getting us all on. What a week of unveiling. Centuries of racial assault and resulting deep inequity revealed for even the most reluctant to witness their complicity in a crucible moment of continuing police brutality and killing, as well as in the underlying deep disparity of economic opportunity and political power. It gives me pause to begin today, but really our endeavor on this webinar is of a piece and on the road to peace. It's structural racism and violence, after all, that necessitates our communities to strive to survive, much less thrive. Yet the latter is our common goal. Years ago, the reigning marathon champion in the country was asked how he persevered through hours of pain. He remarked that he simply didn't avoid it. Rather than run from the first signs of pain in his breathing, in his step, in his muscles, he forced himself to go to the pain, to go to the very center of the pain, and then the pain could not vanquish him. I think that's a good metaphor with our nation's struggle with racial equity and equitable community development. We look away from our collective pain at our peril. We may acknowledge that when one community suffers, we all suffer, but we have been derelict in our duty, especially as white Americans, to go to the heart of those communities and shift our power to them, to address their challenges and realize their own unique visions. Ours is a sin of fake innocence, as James Baldwin called out, and complicity. A young woman recently, asking me about what the 80s were like, reflected after I gave her a litany of those times that included bad fashion, oil shocks, and disco. She reflected, oh yeah, and in the 80s, you tolerated racism. Well, we have a lot more work to do before we can say we have both gone to the middle of the pain and shifted the balance of power. We are mere minutes away from the exact opposite, a willful and comprehensive turning away from potentially beloved communities, coupled with acceptance, if not participation, in a string of dire assaults on their ability to rise up and prosper. Top of mind is police brutality and killings, of course, but the parade of horribles also includes redlining and mortgage discrimination, environmental assaults like Superfund sites and brownfields, growth disparities in healthcare and health outcomes, including the disproportionate death rates by COVID-19 for Black and Brown people, massive capital disinvestment, and lack of political representation. Nothing short of putting more and different people in charge will properly atone for these shocking attacks. LeJune Montgomery Tebron, the first Black woman CEO and president of the Kellogg Foundation, in what seems like a lifetime ago, presided over a star-studded panel on achieving racial equity collectively at the US Congress of the American Indian this past fall. You could not ask for a more illustrious group, and they articulated well our long-deferred recognition of the stories, voices, and aspirations of communities of color throughout the country. But I was left wondering, how do we move these talented folks from speaking their truths to being able to act with all the power necessary to affect change? How do we put more and different people in charge and rebalance power forever? I think it's time to shoot the moon, win every hand and every suit. By making the problem bigger, we expand the solution set. You cannot disconnect environmental justice from economic justice and political ascendancy. This is about power across all societal needs. This transcends our good food, good money, good resources, shorthand approach to our work and systems change across those verticals into good living for all. And it requires attending to race directly. Let us not only not tolerate racism now, but let's banish it through action. For those of us like me, our remedial education will be facilitated today by 4 community stewards who hold that community vision and foment effective action. And then our courage to hand over power will actually fuel the beloved revolution. Take us too hard and we'll have your back too. And nobody can make us do wrong. But take us for granted, leaving a love unshown makes willpower weak and temptation strong. We people lead more than marches. This you must understand. Earn well our vote if you still can. If you wanna do right all day, human, you gotta have a do right all life plan. Thanks, Taj.
Oh, sing it, Kat. Thank you for inviting us into your living room here so that we can be together during this painful and transformative time. And I think, you know, your sort of invitation in the midst of the pain to remember our freedom dreams, to as you're inviting us to think about what it means to create what our friends across the global South call the buen vivir, the good life. And we were so blessed in our last gathering to hear from a true environmental justice elder and champion, Harold, and the work that he's done through the Regenesis Institute. And in some ways, the conversation today is about what the next generation of environmental justice and climate justice and equitable development leaders have done in their communities, sort of building off the tradition that Harold and his generation have laid down and are still at it. Harold's still in the mix and still with us, shoulder to shoulder, and helping us to weave the lessons across generations. I posted a link in the chat that's got a link to a document with an overview of the series and some of the resources that the folks today are going to be sharing about. And this week is the opportunity to explore what it means to take a just transition approach to the question of equitable development. And we're going to hear from some of the folks who've been on that journey for some decades, and some folks who are just beginning to explore what that journey might mean for their community. So I was as the resources were coming together on the resource page, what I realized is if folks just watch all the videos, listen to all those podcasts, and read all those reports, you will have a PhD at the end of this process. So this conversation is an introduction into a very deep body of practice and a very deep community of practice that's really done the work of showing what happens when the folks who've been at the center of the pain have the resources they need to advance the solutions from the front lines that are the solutions that we all need. So we're going to begin our journey with our sister Anasa in Memphis, and who you heard from last week if you joined us in the conversation last week. And she's gonna tell a story about how she made the journey from culture shifter and entrepreneur and cultural warrior into into community and equitable development. And so Nasa, we'll pass it on to you to tell us a little bit about Memphis.
Thank you, Taj. Thank you, Kat. I love when Kat sings. The first time I ever met Kat, she was singing a Stevie Wonder song, and I was like, now that's a woman I can get behind. Yes. So my name is Anasa Troutman, and by trade, I'm a cultural strategist and a writer and a producer, and now I'm an emerging developer. I've been an artist and an entrepreneur literally my whole adult life, so the role of developer is not just unexpected, but for me it was completely shocking, mostly because I lived in New York as it was being gentrified in Brooklyn. I lived in Atlanta as it was being gentrified. I lived in Nashville, I was being gentrified. And so in my mind, I had made the connection between developers and displacement and extraction, and had decided in my mind that the role of developer was for one who didn't care about community, who was more interested in, you know, sacrificing community for profits and all that. And so I didn't come to Memphis as a developer. I came to Memphis as an artist. I was invited to Memphis by the folks who run historic Claiborne Temple, or who at least ran it at the time. And I was brought here to be able to co-write and produce a musical called Union the Musical. So the thing that's important to know about this building in Memphis is that historic Claiborne Temple is the site of the 1968 sanitation workers strike, which was the subject of the musical. We were writing and producing a musical that was about this building, about what happened in this building, in commemoration of Dr. King's the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. So the sanitation worker strike was Dr. King's very last campaign. He was in Memphis when he was assassinated, working on this campaign, and was assassinated about 4/10 of a mile down the road at the Lorraine Motel. And the reason why King came to Memphis was because his theory of change a year before had expanded, right? He was like, well, if we're gonna have true liberation for all people in America, what we need to do is expand our theory from just talking about race to talking about race, class, and militarism. And of course, he had a difficult time. He lost funders, he lost partners. His team was tripping. Like, why are you doing this? You're ruining our shtick. We have to stick to this conversation about race. We're making progress. You are gonna ruin all of this. And he had a vision, and he knew that we needed to expand our conversation. And he came to Memphis because in the sanitation worker strike, he saw the convergence of all those conversations coming together. And he thought, well, if I go to Memphis and I help make the sanitation worker strike successful, well, then I have a national exemplar for our work. And then the work that we're building around the Poor People's Campaign has a case study that we can actually use to be able to move our work forward. And just a note, I've been sitting with this conversation all week and thinking about the pandemic and the protests and how we've been front row to conversations about race and class for the past 2.5 months. And in the past 10 days, we have now added a conversation about militarism to that national conversation. And what it looks like for us right now is we are in the middle of Dr. King's final theory of change. And we have to deal with race, class, and militarism in order for us to be able to have a just and equitable country and world. But I digress. So I found myself in Memphis producing this musical, and really was just doing what you do when you write a musical. I was doing a lot of reading, a lot of community building, meeting people, and really listening to the stories that I needed to be able to ingest, to be able to recreate the story inside this building. And I heard the story of Dr. King, of course, in his last year, but I also heard stories about Memphis and what Memphis was poised to be when the yellow fever breakout happened, and how it was supposed to be the center of the South. It was supposed to be Atlanta. And what happened when all of the wealthy white landowners decided to flee Memphis, and it kind of took Memphis off its trajectory. I learned the history of Robert Church, who was the first African-American millionaire in all of America, who lived in Memphis around the corner from Claiborne Temple. His rise, and then the destruction of his legacy by the wealthy white power structure here in Memphis at the hands of E.H. Crump. And I learned what I realized in that moment, like hearing all those stories, was that the sanitation worker strike didn't happen in a vacuum. It was actually the repeating of a long legacy of stuff that had happened in Memphis, and that legacy had not ended, that we were still living in the neighborhood where historic Claiborne Temple is, the same exact legacy that the sanitation workers had been living. And so historic Claiborne Temple, just to give you a little bit of context, in addition to having this history, it also is in the middle of downtown Memphis. So when you're talking about like the opportunity for development, the opportunity for generating income, it is really, you can't get any better than this. It's right on the edge of downtown and South Memphis. And some folks had purchased the building at this time because they wanted to have a church in it. Their church, they were looking for a building, and they thought to themselves, oh, well, if we're going to have the building, we might as well just put a brewery in here during the day and sell beer so people can go across the street and go to the FedEx Forum, which is where our basketball games are played and all the concerts and stuff. And the community was like, no, actually, you can't do that. This is a sacred Black space. This is civil rights history. This is the seat of our future, and you cannot do such frivolous things in the building. And to their credit, at first they didn't. And that's when I came in. I came in to do this musical, and I spent a lot of time with the owners of the building. I spent a lot of time with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, just because I was curious, because as an artist, that's what we do. We get curious, we ask questions, we sit in the room, we soak it all up, because our goal is to be able to regurgitate it and give it to you in a way that is simple and easy for you to understand. But what I realized is that through this process, at the end of the musical, they asked me to stay and not just do the art, but to take over the entire project. And they were saying, this is your work. You know what to do. You have all this vision. We don't know what to do. You should just do it. I took over the project, and 6 months into me taking over the project, the donor decided that he had had enough. He was not as excited as everybody else about the work of, racial justice and equity and all the community wealth building. He just was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to have a conversation about it. I've decided that we're going to sell the building. We're going to finish the renovation, and that's it. And I said, no. I said to him, I can't let you do this. I've spent all this time in this place, and I know how much the city needs this building. And if we are going to be an economic justice institution, that what you're doing is the complete opposite of what we're talking about in terms of building justice. And so we got into a battle, and we spent the next 9 months really thinking about how I was going to be able to buy this building. And through literally the grace of God, at the 11th hour, we were able to connect with the amazing, beautiful, wonderful souls at the Restorative Economics Fund to be able to purchase the building. So where we are right now is the building has been stabilized. This is our neighborhood. This is Claiborne Temple right here. But if you see, there is $2 billion worth of development happening in the neighborhood right now. This project alone is $950 million. The FedEx Forum, as I said, where all of our major events happen, is here. FedEx is building a whole new station right over here. The riverfront is happening over here. And so we've stabilized the building now. So we've been in there for the past year, really having events. We've served 20,000 people. We've had 200 unique events. We've had weddings, community members. We had the Black Awards in Memphis. We have had performances of Union. We've had so many things in the building. And now we are building a whole new institution, and we see our work as, one, reanimating the story of the building so people can understand its history and its future, but two, really reanimating the work of the sanitation workers and bringing this conversation about equity across race, class, and gender to the city and across the South. So the model that we have built here is, one, there's 3 sections. One, of course, cultural strategy, because as a cultural strategist, I understand that the way to build narrative power, economic power, and political power is absolutely through shifting culture. And so in order for us to be able to make this humongous transformation in Memphis, we have to be able to talk about our core values, our culture, and the narratives that are built based on those core values. So there's always storytelling, there's always community building, there's always all the things that I do as a strategist in my normal life. Two is this idea of community wealth building, because what I have found, which I'm sure was like no surprise to anybody else, was that there are no real pathways for people who are called poor to build wealth and to build finance and resource in their community. There is a conversation about, like financial, what do they call that? Financial literacy class, where we help you balance your checkbook, or we'll help you learn how to start a business. But I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, and I'm telling you that entrepreneurship is not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart, and it doesn't always work. So to be able to pin someone's entire future on the possibility of being entrepreneurial, and then the possibility of your entrepreneurial thing working, is to me unjust. Yes, we should make those pathways available. Yes, people who want to express themselves that way should be able to, but to pin the future of an entire community on that, to me, is just creating more barriers. So the third part of it is restorative development. So like, how are we thinking about how the restoration of this building is actually talking about the restoration of the entire neighborhood and the entire community? So we're developing really these ideas about what it means for us to be restorative as developers. And this model that we've been talking about really is the integration of the cultural strategy model that I built 10 or 12 years ago at the Movement Strategy Center, and what I'm learning from the restorative economics model from Emeka Agbo at the restorative economics work. Because to me, the intersection of culture and culture shift, and thinking about what it means to shift the culture of the economy in Memphis, in the South, and across the country, would be such an incredibly powerful way for us to approach transformation. So the thing that happened next to me is that I realized that in order for these are the phases of the building that we're in. We finished phase 1. We're about to go into phase 2. We actually got our final approval from the National Park Service literally 2 hours ago. So now we're going to actually start construction in September, and I'm so excited. But what I realized in this work is that for us to be able to do this in our neighborhood is really not enough. And we really need to be able to take the model that we're building, the financing that we're attracting, and multiply it across Memphis's Black communities. Because if we do that, then we're not just talking about one little thing, we're actually talking about citywide transformation. So we've been working with 3 other neighborhoods to be able to help them to identify cultural-based projects that can handle an incubator, that can handle community engagement, that can handle the development, or a group of partners who can do that together, and being able to show them our model, teach them our model, and then help them attract funding for those projects. But I can't do that inside of Claiborne Temple, because as you saw, Claiborne Temple has a very specific mission and vision. So I have created a new institution. I told y'all I'm a producer, so I have a media firm called The Big We. We have a podcast, and we're starting to develop other media. And so we've created the Big We Foundation now. And one of the big parts of our work is to be able to attract this capital, build infrastructure for capital, to be able to share this work across Memphis. And then we thought, well, if we're going to do it across Memphis, we need to think about the entire South, because I've been living in the South for, most of my life. And I know people like Jessica Norwood, people like Aaron Dale, folks in Jackson, Mississippi, like folks all over the South who are doing similar work, and thinking about how it looks for us to bring all the things that we have together so that we actually can attract the kind of capital that would be actually super transformative and not just transactional neighborhood by neighborhood. And so through that work, we've been working with neighborhoods in Memphis, and now working with neighborhoods across the South, and really thinking about what it means for us to be able to say our stories matter, our neighborhoods matter. We must have sovereignty over our resources. We must have sovereignty over our future and our governance. And until we have all of those things, then the justice that we seek is not going to be achievable. I think that's all I have to say for now.
Whew. Thank you, Anasa.
Thank you.
One of the things you shared with me when I came to visit with you, and is that, having lived in many cities, New York, LA, Atlanta, there's a certain creativity in the people of Memphis that is really unparalleled. Like people's ability to just, in the circumstance they're in just make magical, beautiful things happen.
Yeah, I mean, Memphis is 65% Black with a 40% poverty rate. 50% of all children are born into poverty in Memphis. And what I know about Southern people, one, is like Southern people are just creative. Like creativity is Memphis' #1 natural resource, if you ask me. But the other thing I know is that poverty and oppression and having to figure out how you're going to live and feed your kids is the most creativity generating thing that could ever happen, because you're not going to just let your family fall away. You're going to find a way to be able to do the thing that you need to do for your family. And so there's a level of creativity here in Memphis. And of course, Memphis is the birthplace of American music. This jazz was born here. Like, you know, this is the place where Ida B. Wells did her work. Robert Church, who I mentioned before, was the founder of Beale Street, was W.C. Handy's patron, was Ida B. Wells' patron. All that stuff happened here in Memphis, and that legacy still carries on. And there is a group of young people here who are like in their 20s, who are making art that is remaking this city and remaking what's possible in this city. And those are the ones who I'm like, hey, have you thought about what it looks like not to just create in the studio, but to actually create in your neighborhood? And can we support you in becoming developers? Because they are the ones who are holding the vision. They are the ones that are already doing the community work. They're the ones who are already rethinking the way that we are living, and to give them the tools to actually build out their environment in such a way that their community can then become what they know it can be, to me is the most powerful thing that we can do in this moment.
So the other thing you said to me is that King's assassination essentially froze Memphis in time. That Memphis, the trauma of that, right, sort of as the Black community in which, as King brought this question of the triplets, racism, militarism, and greed, and said, as a nation, we need a radical revolution in values to transform this. And violence came for all of us, like froze the place and sort of froze all of us. So to sort of be in this moment where essentially the nation has come back to that question in a way that we're not going back. Like there's only forward from this point is so profound. Because I was kind of thinking about, you know, you're essentially kind of in the beginning of your just transition journey as Memphis. The folks who we're going to hear from have been on that journey a lot longer. And we're all essentially picking up the question where King left it.
I mean, the thing about Memphis is it's like there's what I am seeing in this moment is like there is this guy, this E.H. Crump, who you should look up if you have time, really established a way of being in Memphis that said, you know, the wealthy white men have, which is not weird, right? It's not weird to be like, the wealthy white man has charge. But what is like the legacy of violence is palpable, different in Memphis, because what it cost in Memphis was the life of Martin Luther King, right? And the day that he was assassinated was 4 days after a 16-year-old Black boy was murdered by the police at the end of a march. And so what you have in Memphis is the sanitation worker strike, the 2 sanitation workers that were killed that sparked that strike, then the murder of this 16-year-old boy, his funeral that was at Claiborne Temple where no people can get in, was overflowing. And then you have Martin Luther King's assassination. So like, it's like wave after wave after wave after wave of sorrow that made people feel like, one, they had done something. I got here, Memphians were telling me we killed Dr. King. And I had to spend 2 months just being like, actually, no, that wasn't you. And then it's like, the second thing is like, one, they felt like it was their fault. And 2, it made them feel like it wasn't safe to fight. It wasn't safe to fight because Dr. King was an international loss. It wasn't just like, oh, your hometown hero is gone. It was literally the intergalactic hero for justice was swiped away a half a mile down the road from historic Claiborne Temple. And it created like a time capsule of pain that made people feel like they couldn't move. And which is why these young people, these artists, these emerging developers are so important, because they are not stuck. They are not afraid. They have vision, and they're leading me. They're leading me. And in this moment, like when we're out marching and we're protesting now, they are the ones who are on the front lines, and they are the ones who are leading. And for me, for the folks who are on the front lines to also be the ones who have the power and resource to reimagine our communities, that's where I want to live.
Whew. Thank you. And I think the role of culture and creativity in healing, in reimagining, rearticulating, understanding what our relationship really is to ourselves and each other is just.
I'm not going to talk about that because I will talk for 2 more hours. But culture is the #1 strategy to be able to get us where we want to go, and I'll stand on that for the rest of my life. I'll stand on it for life, and not just storytelling, culture. And I'll stand.
We hear you. And this is a PhD level conversation for folks who are just jumping in, and like you're in the deep end of the pool, because these folks are not. Everyone here is not playing around, and they've been doing this for. Speaking of not playing around, we're gonna go across the country to Rawa and push Buffalo, and I think Buffalo is one of the places like Spartansburg, and the story you heard last week from Brother Harold is one of the places where many of us look to broaden our imagination about what's possible, because of the depth of the relationship building and the organizing that's been done there, and the scope and breadth of the economic transformation that they've been able to advance. So I'll turn it over to you, Rawa, to tell a little bit of the story of how you started into this work in your community and what y'all have grown together.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Taj. I just actually want to start by saying how powerful Anasa is. And when you speak in your power, it's like salve for the soul. And I agree 100% with you that cultural organizing, and even in this moment, in these moments that we've been living, art and artists are critical to our transformation. Little short story about me. So for 15 years, I was actually ran the only collective theater company that is rooted in the perspective of the Black voice, but we were multi-generational, multi-ethnic, and it's called Ujima, which is Collective Work and Responsibility. And we felt that we used our platform to build the beloved community. The community, of course, is the world, but we were doing our part where we were really rooted in love and justice. So that is meaningful to me. And then, of course, I came to Push. So been there about 7 years now. A little bit about Push Buffalo. Our work is very much rooted in a place-based strategy, but that place-based strategy is really our place of practice. So we like to this while centering real people and centering the needs of the planet in a frontline community to be self-determined and to own and control our future. And so our work is at the national level. We are members of the Climate Justice Alliance, recently becoming members, People's Action, many other sort of formations, and a real deep partnership with movement generation and folks like AFEN and folks like Urban Tilth with Doria. And much of our learnings and peer learning really came from them around the policy issues that were happening in California. So a lot of our statewide work that we've been able to accomplish through New York Renews and passing the most comprehensive and equitable climate legislation in the country last year really were lessons learned from them. And because they were ahead of us, we have to ask for more because we're a decade behind them. So really, I think that's the thing about the movement of movements that we all belong to. But for us, what really drives our work, and I think what makes us successful, is rooting in our local environment, meeting the needs of our people. And the backdrop of Buffalo, New York is that we are the third poorest city in America. We are the sixth most segregated, formerly fourth. And when you understand underlying conditions, that data really means something. We had, at the height of Buffalo, we were the sixth economy in the world. We fed the world with our grain elevators. We were, the start of industry and steel industry in particular. But really by 1970, we'd lost half of our population. and we were in about a 50-year economic decline. So that is what we're trying to, like the phoenix out of the ashes, trying to rise up to. So Push Buffalo is a community-based organization founded in 2005. Our mission is to mobilize residents to create strong neighborhoods with quality, affordable housing, to expand local hiring opportunities, and to advance racial, economic, and environmental justice in Buffalo. Our theory of change really revolves around community control, community ownership of resources, and the just transition strategy framework for transformative structural change. Our place of practice, the 25 square block area that we call the Green Development Zone, or the GDZ, it was founded in 2008 by about 400 local residents. And we combined green affordable housing construction, community-based renewable energy projects, housing weatherization, green jobs training, green infrastructure, and vacant land restoration, really towards the goal of creating pathways to employment for neighborhood residents, and of course, reducing our carbon footprint. And I'm gonna just try to do a share screen. It didn't work for me yesterday, but I'll try it today. Let's see. Yes, it will work. Great. I like to talk in pictures. So can people see my screen? Great. So this is us. Here are some of our people. This is, of course, the Just Transition Strategy framework that we've adopted. How do you get out of an extractive economy that is really rooted in colonialism, heteropatriarchy, fossil fuel extraction, where the wealth is enclosed at the top? How do we stop that and build the new towards a regenerative and feminist ethical caring, sacred economy? And what are the filters, the value filters that we use? And so where we start is always with the people. Here are my people. I always bring them with me. Our movement is intergenerational. It is multi-ethnic, and it is really meeting the needs of the most impacted and bringing the resources to our place so that they can be self-determined. And what we know from 15 years of doing the kind of community planning, they are the planners, designers of everything that we do, including our campaigns, including our housing development, including our workforce strategies and renewable energy projects. And what we know is we may be poor and we may be marginalized, maybe all those things, but the reality is there is local knowledge, a connection to place, and local expertise that actually, these are the people that are also rebuilding our neighborhood. So we always say at Push, and we have a lot of, we're really good at branding. So that Push Buffalo t-shirts and all the different swag that we have, it's all over our community. We always come when we say, we know what we want where we live. Real people have real power. And when we show up in large numbers, people listen. Here are some more of our resident leaders. We've got one of our previous board chairs. This young man right here on the right-hand corner, he is actually a teacher now. We taught him how to rebuild houses. That is a training house, which he is now teaching other young men and women in our neighborhood to build houses and have local expertise and knowledge around the trades. He was a 6-year-old who grew up across the street from one of our housing, and he just watched us for years, and then he eventually got a job with us. This is us in the People's Climate March back in 2008, and we, of course, marched with the solutions because these are the folks that are driving the solution in our neighborhood. That young woman right there is one of our organizers. She became an organizer with Push Buffalo as we were doing our first public accountability around utilities. We knocked at her house and said, "Are you paying too much for your heating bill?" She said, "As a matter of fact, my heat is off right now." And we thought she was a really powerful, strong voice. So she, of course, became a leader and an organizer with us. This right here is our Green Development Zone map, where all of our projects happen. Again, just some examples of some of the green jobs. Here are some workers from folks coming out of returning citizens, rebuilding 16 Winter. We've got our folks here with the first 100% community solar project on the roof of School 77. We have folks that also do stormwater management using nature-based solutions. And we do weatherization, green efficiency work. We've done about 1,500 since 2011 in our community. And here's what some of the properties look like in the past and what we're able to do with them. We use things like cement hardy board plank. We've got metal roofs that are recyclable at the end of their lives. They last longer. So we really pay attention to these things. And in the front, you will see rain gardens and green infrastructure systems built by our community. Just another example, the greenhouse on the lower right is the first net zero house that was a renovation. And it was also a training house. So 43 men and women got to install, you know, geothermal. There's a beautiful solar array in the back of the house that is a hot water tank thermal array. The house next to it, you see it looks a little pink in the background. That was also a training house. 81 folks went through that training house. It has everything the net zero house has except for the geothermal, but it does have radiant heating. So these are the kinds of systems that we are training folks on. Our green infrastructure, Buffalo has a serious combined sewer overflow problem. We were able to, through our policy, advocacy, get rid into Buffalo, New York's long-term control plan with the EPA, where initially all $400 million was being committed to great infrastructure. Through our work and through our demonstration projects, we were able to move $90 million of that to go towards green infrastructure over a period of a decade. And then we started training men and women from our neighborhood, many of them often earning prevailing wages. Here are just a few more examples of a community garden. You see some of our local farmers. We don't always build on the land that we buy. Housing, even though housing is a real need, what we do is we do annual community congresses and we ask the community, how would they like to prioritize the land? And so this one, it was 5 homes that were demoed, and rather than build housing there, they wanted a community garden because we have a huge immigrant refugee population, people from all over the world. And we of course, are also in a food desert, but also it's difficult to find culturally significant food to ourselves. So people are able to grow their food and feed their families that way. We do permeable pavers, we do rain gardens, we have cisterns above ground and below ground to harness and capture storm water. This right here, excuse me one second, is School 77. I call this our most, prideful project to date. It was a $15 million project. We went over 4 years of our planning. The community asked us to take control of this building that is very meaningful to them. Many of them went to school there, taught there, every which way. It's in the heart of our community, which is very quickly gentrifying. And of course, we saw big developers driving around and the community said we're not having. So we took control of this building. We were able to purchase through this building because of our community residents. They did 4 years of planning. We actually worked with some cultural organizations locally to imagine and reimagine what could go in there. We went on learning journeys. You name it, we did it. Once we decided, or the community decided, we were going to do senior housing, the young people that were part of the planning said, fine, then it will be intergenerationally programmed. So there's a ton of community spaces, including the gymnasium, being churned into intergenerational programming space where they play soccer, basketball, other kinds of things. Then the seniors come down and do senior Pilates and yoga when the kids are not there. There's a park on the outside. This is, of course, where our solar array is as a demonstration project. And the community wanted the auditorium to turn into a performance space that was affordable and culturally appropriate for our community. So they got to select a 40-year-old African-American theater company to go in there. So that's what's in there. They got to select the other business that serves youth K through 12, the social enterprises, all kinds of things. And then, of course, it's our new home of Push Buffalo, where we could bring all of our staff into one building. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And of course, the other demand was that there would be a lot of community spaces. So we tried to convert many of the spaces into that as much as possible. And of course, it's 30 affordable senior apartments are on the top 2 floors. This is actually designed by the seniors that live in that building. It's a stormwater management rain garden or living roof system. And as you can see, the stuff around there is actually from recycled tires, because if elders fall, that means something soft will cushion them and hopefully they won't break a bone. There's also several different entrances, including a ramp for people to get on and off. But this is where they can walk around. There's benches and things like that. Our systems impact over the last decade of 15 years. So we have about 125 properties that we own and have rehabbed. $62 million are invested in green affordable housing. 102 fully rented apartments in our community. More than 1,000 homes transformed through weatherization and green retrofit. Over 250 green jobs created, and over 450 workers trained in different training programs. When we also connect our young men and women to employment, we advocate for living wages, family sustaining wages, and other kinds of benefits, including PTO and medical benefits. We have moved in the state more than $130 million in new investments to go to weatherization across the state, more than $90 million in green infrastructure invested in the city of Buffalo. And obviously we're addressing our climate emissions. One thing I want to say about New York Renews is that 35% of all clean energy funds will be going to impacted communities to do the type of work that Push Buffalo is doing, so it could go at a real scale throughout New York State. And on top of course, transitioning off of the fossil fuel economy. This is really also meaningful to us is, we are thinking 7 generations ahead, and educating future generations is important. So this is a rain garden for one of the schools that we did with a bunch of first graders. And we often say, what the hands do teach the heart. And I will leave it with that. Just some more beautiful children is always how I like to end everything.
Whew. Thank you so much, Rawa. Listening to Harold, share your story last week, and then, coming into this conversation, it's amazing to me that there are people in the world who still think about sort of the environment as an issue that sort of white people care about, right? That's where the solutions are. And, the work that Harold, has done with his community in Spartansburg, the work that you've done with your community, and the real powerful innovation that's deeply rooted in understanding the climate mitigation and adaptation and resilience challenges that we're facing right now, but we're going to be facing in increasing ways as the climate impacts of the climate crisis intensify, is just so just so powerful. And I think the question I'm left with, and we'll pick this up in the conversation, is like both for Spartansburg and for Push, like what was the foundation that allowed you to do at a certain scale what other folks have done, but not nearly at the same scale? And that's really a central question of this overall learning series, of like, how do we have more communities that have achieved the economic just transition to the scale that you all have? And so thank you for giving us
Did you want me to answer that?
I mean, sure.
Yep, yeah. I'm gonna say, for us, it's simple. I told you guys we were in a 50-year economic decline. So we started with the framework of help is not coming, because they had forgotten about us. We were the forgotten city. And in that, just like this moment of what's happening now, is there are opportunities. So we took opportunity because no one was paying attention. No one wanted to live in our neighborhoods, but we picked that area because it was the concentration of poverty. It was like one of the 3rd poorest in the entire country. Also incredibly diverse. The cultural fabric was still there, and the amount of vacancy and abandonment was only at about 25% compared to other parts of our community. And also it abutted a very, very middle to upper class neighborhood. So we knew, because we knew what was happening in California, we knew what's happening in Chicago with gentrification. We didn't have the word gentrification in our community even, because it didn't exist at the time, but we knew it was coming, that we were about 10 years ahead of it. And so we bought that land when it was just affordable and really inexpensive. Trying to buy land now in that neighborhood is ridiculous, let me tell you. And so we were able to, and then of course we had things like block by block approach. And again, really the power of Push and the success of Push, that the people that live there told us what to do, and we are stewards. I live in that neighborhood. I grew up in that neighborhood. I am of and from there. But since I've been an employee of Push, I really do consider myself as a steward of community planning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Woo! So as you mentioned, a lot of the what you brought to Push drew from relationships and learnings from the folks we're about to hear from, Mia and Doria. And if I turn around and look out the window, some days I can see smoke, and some days I can see fire. And that smoke and that fire is sometimes coming from the Chevron refinery, which is actually pretty far from where I am. I'm in sort of South Oakland, and Richmond is far away from where I am. And if I look out my window, I can see the smoke. And so the folks you're about to hear from are going to share with you, what it means to live in the shadow of an oil refinery, what it means to take on one of the largest and most powerful corporations in the world, and to win, and to win big, because they, like you, Rawa, listen to the people, and they know that's where the power is. So we're going to hear a little bit about how some of the magic of Richmond has unfolded. So I'll turn it over to Mia and Doria, and you can tell us a little more.
Unmute myself here. Hello, everybody. My name is Doria Robinson. I am the Executive Director of Urban Tilth here in Richmond, California. And, I was asked to say just a few minutes to open up on what kind of brings me to this work. So I'm sitting here right now in Richmond and my great aunt's house. I'm a 4th generation Richmond resident. My grandparents actually came up here from the South, from Louisiana and Arkansas, great-grandparents, during World War II, around that time, to find work, to get out of Jim Crow, to find a better life. They were not people from cities. They were countryside, country folk, like Shady Grove, Louisiana. This is not a popular town. They were poor. They came up together. And I more and more understand the reason why I do the work that I do now is because of my experience growing up in a migrant Southern family, right? We landed here in Richmond, but we were Southern people who had a different frame on how you do community, right? So when I was growing up, my grandfather's a minister in the church. There's 19 families who came up together. They were all poor, but they pooled their money and they started buying land. They actually put each other through school to learn to be electricians and carpenters and whatnot. So when they bought that land, they started to build each other homes. And the elders kind of got together and put all these things into a trust. So the reason why I can sit today in my great aunt's house is because it's in the trust, as well as the church, as well as the 350-acre ranch and about 19 other houses around Richmond. I grew up in that kind of a mind frame. People were not rich. They worked as, cleaning houses and, working at gas stations, doing random things. But they understood the power of collective economics in a way that we just rarely see in this community and in the Black community here today. And so when I now kind of talk about the work that we're doing, that I'm doing now in Richmond, that we're doing now in Richmond, you have to understand that it's really centered in my experience of growing up with so many mamas and grandmas and aunties and, every door open, and you kind of run free in a way that just doesn't really exist now because of a lot of different cultural reasons. So true that culture drives this. So Urban Tilth is an urban agriculture organization. And, I thought I was going to be doing work here in Richmond that was basically reconnecting people with land, having that relationship with land that I had when we were at the ranch, like growing up, which is a few miles north in Fairfield, California. And I thought it was a good thing. It was a healthy thing for us because there's so many threats in Richmond. I live currently 12 blocks from the refinery, about 12-ish blocks. I grew up about 5-ish blocks from the refinery. So my view out of my window was this big, massive refinery. And we just all knew that every so often it blew up. Skies would turn red, paint would get eaten off our cars. It's just what was, you know. And I thought the best thing I could do was create a space for youth in this community like I was, where they felt safe, where they could come out, where they could get involved, where they could lead. And so we started building this urban agriculture program, you know, creating gardens where there was vacant lots, taking over public land, doing all this stuff. And it was very powerful, all led by youth. Like youth were running these programs, youth were learning how to grow food, youth were taking back space. And then, you know, kind of at the height of that movement in our history, we had the Chevron fire of 2012 in the middle of our summer youth apprentice program. 40 youth had been growing food for community all summer, and the skies turned red again. Just blacked out, massive fire. You can see it in the photograph there. And Urban Tilth said that we just couldn't be this kind of abstract youth empower, you know, environmental education thing anymore, that it was unjust, that they don't own the sky, and we needed to get involved. And we reached out and got involved with the Richmond Environmental Justice Coalition, which was an organization there that was kind of responding to the fire. And now we're kind of in the work that we're about to tell you about. So I'm gonna hand it to Mia so she can go a little bit further.
Thanks, Doria. I'm having trouble even knowing where to start, because first I just feel like I'm bursting with wanting to just acknowledge and just speak voice to how inspired I am by these amazing women of color leaders who are the leaders that we need in this moment. And I'm just like overwhelmed. So I just had to say that. Gotta try to get myself together. But yeah, you know, since Taj and Kat really encouraged us to start what we were going to say with some personal story, I just, you know, that's very personal to me. But I, like, in this moment, I just, where I got into the movement, where I got into this work that has brought me to the incredibly heart-centered organizing that I had the opportunity to be able to do, and also to, you know, get this, as Taj says, the PhD, you know, in just transition, and learn about, you know, all kinds of things I never thought I'd have to know about, you know, solar panels and water catchment systems and housing, you know, construction and all this stuff. But it really, the origin for me was, and it feels a little strangely full circle right now, is that I got involved in organizing when I was a student on campus. And Rodney King that was one of the first visualizations of police beating and brutality that was shared that widely. And subsequently the LA uprisings, that's what inspired me to get involved in organizing. And I started as a campus organizer around organizing around racial justice issues. And I wanted to say that because, like, I just feel like everything that has brought us to this moment and what we're talking about right now is so perfectly aligned with that. And it just feels like the roots of inequality in our country that have brought us into this point where we're having having to deal with the cumulative impacts of the depth of the inequality in our country, and we haven't dealt with it yet. And that's what's brought us to this moment and to these set of solutions, which is really beautiful. I work for Asian Pacific Environmental Network, APEN, and I've been there since I was a youth organizer in 1996. So I've been there for a long time. What brought me to organizing at APEN was formed around this vision for environmental justice for low-income communities, for communities of color. We were finding that like as a Asian American myself, that organizing and building power in immigrant and refugee communities that had their roots in Asian homelands, that was just not happening. And we really just needed to, especially at this intersection of racism, poverty, and pollution, that we need to build power for change. And that was the basis for APEN and our work. And that's what brought us into this whole conversation about just transition. When we started fighting first the pollution coming out of the refinery that was impacting a Laotian community that had been in Thai refugee camps after the Vietnam, displaced from their homelands from a militarized war from the United States, ended up in Thai refugee camps for over a decade. Finally were able to move their families out of refugee camps and into Richmond, into a historic Black community and a historic community that was like a landing place for immigrants and refugees. And out of that, also became neighbors to one of the largest polluters in the state. It's still to this day is one of the largest polluters in the state, one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases in the state. So destabilizing the local community, destabilizing the climate. And our communities, we were so lucky to have strong partners like folks from Urban Health, like folks from the Communities for a Better Environment, folks with West County Toxics Coalition, who had been doing the organizing for years, and that's how we started developing our community vision. I just want to say too that like all these places that we've been talking about, they have a lot in common. If you'll notice, there are these long histories of racial inequality, of state-sponsored violence against Black communities in particular. They have a history of these slow-moving disasters at this intersection of poverty, of racism, and pollution. And they have the fast-moving disasters like hurricanes, wildfires, floods, refinery explosions, industrial accidents. We have this in common. We also have in common that these communities have a real vision for transformation, with racial justice at the very core, that are centered on people who have been most impacted, and that solution that is centered on community needs is really coming from the people who have been at the brunt of our dysfunctional economy. And that these are the folks who are really driving this vision, and in all these ways that have been described, which is just so amazing and inspiring. And I wanted to start with that because I just can't talk enough about how much these communities, how evident it is that these communities are fighting for more than just survival in this moment. And I think it's really important right now, as we're talking about these cumulative impacts, of the economic collapse, the pandemic, the growing climate crisis, like all these things combined, that what we have an opportunity to push for right now is more than just survival. It is something that is better, and it's better and beautiful in the eyes of our communities. And that's what we share in common. That's what we're fighting for. So I just had to start there. And now I'm gonna share my screen to start some of our Richmond conversation. So, and Dora, you can start going ahead. It's gonna come up in a second.
Sounds good. So I think one of the things that we really have to offer during this session is our work collectively. We each have a really powerful story. Each organization is doing really amazing work. APEN is doing amazing work here. Urban Health is doing amazing work here. But we actually have come together in what we call the Richmond Our Power Coalition, with a number of other organizations that are base building organizations here in Richmond that are actually cross-sector base building organizations here in Richmond to try to move a larger body of work. A body of work that's not just only about food or food access or land justice, or racial justice, or justice for immigrants, or justice or housing justice, but actually the collection of all of these things, so that we can actually speak to the areas where they overlap, and we can actually build together towards this just transition, this new economy that we're really that we really need. And so the Richmond Our Power Coalition is made up of local community organizations fighting to keep us in our homes, making sure we have clean air, water, healthy food, transportation, different ways to have meaningful work and co-governance that's inclusive of the most marginalized members of our communities. Collectively, we hope to develop models of success for just transition for and by frontline community members. And I think that's really key and central to our work. So currently, the Richmond Our Power Coalition includes the Safe Return Project that does work with reentry populations, APIN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, ACE that does amazing work around housing, helped to pass the first rent control ordinance passed in, I think, the state of California recently. Rich City Rides that does really amazing work within the Black community around transportation, but transportation is really the Trojan horse for their work. Cooperation Richmond that helps to have low-income communities of color start their own worker-owned cooperative businesses. Richmond Land is a new land trust starting in Richmond to really address the long-term housing, long-term asset building, community wealth building work that we need to do. The Richmond Progressive Alliance, it's really addressing our civic engagement as well as electoral politics, and of course, urban health. Next slide. So we really use the Just Transition kind of platform and strategies that actually Rawa presented really quickly to guide our work. We understand that you can't just do one part of these strategies and actually be successful. You need to actually do them all. So there are members within our coalition that really focus on stopping the bad, fighting the new initiatives that the refinery and the petroleum industry here are always coming up with to, continue to poison us. There needs to be somebody holding down that fight, right? Like we need to not have that progressing as we try to build this new economy. So we need to end the bad. We need to also have folks within our coalition working on changing the rules. So really addressing policy, both policy that helps to poison us and policies that impede our progress on creating the economy that we need. So it's important to really, look for the places where we need to change the rules and to work in that sphere as well. And then, as was mentioned, especially in the work that we're doing that really starts from people, we need to change the story. Growing up here, you get a narrative in your head that you need to either get out, or if you stay here, you might as well be dead, Like, people are getting killed all around you. You feel like you're in a war zone. And it doesn't really feel like anyone really cares. The school system doesn't care. Other people don't care. It's a powerful narrative that keeps you kind of looking out that bedroom window at the refinery saying, there's nothing I can do. It's kind of keep you looking out of your life, like feeling like there's nothing you can do. So a huge part of our work is around changing that story, making it, Richmond a place where you actually want to be, where you can see yourself, where you're empowered, where you can feel in and embody that power to make change. And then a huge part of our work also is to move the money, because it is so important to understand that our communities have been historically extracted from, like the resources, the wealth in our communities have been taken by folks who actually hold that money today. And we need to have an active, well thought out plan to move that money back into the hands of community to fuel the work that we're doing to rebuild our economies in the reflection of what we need, in the reflection of what's healthy, what's culturally appropriate, what's appropriate for the carrying capacity of the land that we're on. And we really just honestly cannot do it at the scale that we need to do it without moving the money. And then also building the new. We understand that we can't just tweak the existing structures that exist to meet our needs. That actually some of the things we need to do is build new structures that are not based in, extraction and just oppression. And so we need to actually be actively building the things that we need. And then finally, we need to be a part of organizing a movement of movements. So that it can't just be about food sovereignty, or it can't just be about, housing justice. We actually need all of our movements to create a movement of movements, so we can move on the level that we need to move to really create the future that we need. So some examples of ending the bad. I know there's a lot of words and all we do is just, there's so much work. You try to put it into categories that people can understand. So recently, Communities for a Better Environment, which is one of our members and one of the anchors of Richmond Our Power Coalition, released a report on how we can decommission the refinery, because we don't imagine that it's going to be around forever. And what happens when that huge toxic, massive complex goes out of commission? We actually need a plan for that. There's air district campaigns to, keep the destruction that they would like to do in order to make money at bay. There are anti-displacement, anti-gentrification campaigns, and there's a Stop Phillips 66 expansion. So one thing that people often forget is that Richmond is only one of 5 other refineries, 6 total, I think, along the coast of the East Bay. So we're one in a string of refineries that you can actually walk to. And there was a whole series of walks, or really powerful walks between the refineries that happened over the past few years. Those led by Native groups here.
I don't know more. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know more. Sorry, my brain went blank.
That's okay.
Yeah, so next slide. Changing the rules, just a few examples. Pushing for healthcare for all. Having some really clear policies around public land, that public lands should be used for the public good, that, it isn't just for making profit, for a public entity, but we should actually consider, all the uses of public lands and have a community voice dictating what happens to those lands. And then, recently, especially this year, we've been working to really fully enfranchise the vote. So multiple members are working on various types of voter engagement, voter registration, youth forums, different avenues to make sure that as many people as possible vote, and to actually address some of the other issues, like, can we lower the voting age? How do we make sure that people returning from incarceration have a vote? How do we address, especially in local politics, if our immigrant populations and their, it's really necessary that they have a say in what happens in electoral politics. So there are definitely folks working on a kind of comprehensive plan and different parts of that plan to fully enfranchise the vote. You can go ahead to the next one. Just changing the story. We're also coming up with a podcast, and, we want to actually have a communications campaign to just, share this narrative of the successes that we've built so far, so that, the youth that are growing up now don't feel like I did when I was growing up, that, or me and many other people, that, that you were kind of a throwaway person, and this was a throwaway place that didn't have history, that didn't have, that wasn't a powerful place to be centered in. One of the other kind of large successes that we've had is we've established a Just Transition Fund. So this is actually a fund that we established so that we can do our own grant making. and fund the type of projects that we need to fund in order to make sure that we're moving towards just transition here in Richmond. It was kind of a collaborative project with the Course Foundation, and each year we are able to make grants to organizations that are advancing just transition projects to make sure that that work is being done here. We also envision being able to make loans so that larger projects can get underway as well. But this is a community-driven grant fund specifically focusing on funding just transition projects in Richmond.
All right, am I supposed to take over now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I'm gonna blow through these, and I wanted people to know of these images. All of the images of the folks who are in these beautiful images on these slides are all members and local residents in Richmond and are part of our local movement. So of course, Build the New. We just wanted to list some examples of things that we've been doing. Building a worker-owned cooperative that actually, supports a new way of governing local resources and of building these entities that can actually build the new infrastructure that's needed for a just transition. And I wanted to bring this up too, because today also I got props to Movement for Black Lives, who put out in their week of actions, like particular demands every day of this week. And this day is actually a day to fight for and demand community control. And so I thought I would shout that out. Other things that we're doing are around like increasing access to locally grown food, fighting for land trusts so that we can actually get ahead of the gentrification and housing crisis and have, as Doria was talking about, really have the housing and land issues be something that generates generational security and wealth for our communities, and that we're building this new amazing, we're doing this just transition for Richmond for the people who are there, not for people who are going to gentrify Richmond in the future. I wanted to talk about resiliency hubs. I know we don't really have time, but we've got this amazing project with a youth organization called Rise in Richmond, where we are putting solar panels and storage onto a whole new campus development for really supporting both like community resiliency in terms of climate disasters and heat waves and floods and earthquakes, but also a center for organizing and for really developing community power and working on public banks. I'm trying to go really quickly. Organized movement of movements. These are just some of the pieces that we're doing to make sure that we know that we can't win by ourselves, that we actually need to build a larger base at scale of people who are engaged and of voters and of a powerful set of community folks who are invested in the vision. And I'm just going to end with so much of this work is connected to the broader movement. So Richmond is doing amazing stuff with the Richmond Our Power Coalition, but we're connected to a broader movement for just transition, both across the state through the California Environmental Justice Alliance, across the country through the Climate Justice Alliance, and also globally through the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And I just wanted to mention that before we move on. So I will stop that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry to end abruptly, but I'm worried about time, but this has just been amazing opportunity. Thank you for letting us share.
Thank you all. We really wanted to make sure we gave you all room to really tell the stories in a way that do them justice. And as we mentioned earlier, this is sort of the intro. These webinars are the intro into your PhD course. So if you really want to understand what this work is about, if you really want to figure out how to be a part of it, bring this work to your community, bring resources to these communities that that may need to return to the places from which they were created. This gives you a little bit of an introduction. But I wanna turn it over to Kat, and just with a little bit of time we have left, to see, having having supported work like this. I just, as you were talking about, I was thinking, Kat, there's a set of communities that you've supported and invested deeply in. You, Farhad, Regan, there are folks who have who understand where the solutions are, where the leadership are, and have really taken steps to become partners with folks in community to move these solutions forward. And I just wanted to give you a chance to share any sort of reflections or questions you had, having heard the stories. So
Yeah. Well, this has been tremendous. I'm inspired every time we get to talk to the community stewards of these miraculous endeavors against all odds, and those odds were laid structurally and with racist intent. And it's just remarkable that communities can take back their self-determination and not just survive, but thrive. And I'm very lucky to keep the company that I keep in the communities in which I have gotten to visit and work. And I'm interested in all of them. But I think maybe my role as a person who wants to put more and different people in charge is to really recruit more resources, more opportunities, and more acknowledgement that this is the way we have to go. And right now, especially when a lot of white people are struggling, like, what can I do? I think these are answers and leadership that can offer a beautiful path to beloved communities. And for anybody who doesn't fit that description, which is fine too, these are nonetheless really promising just transition strategies and outcomes that will get us a chance to stay on this planet as a human species, where otherwise climate destruction or social chaos might, allow the earth to spit us out like watermelon seeds. So anyway, you're seeing on the screen details of the next webinar. I'm actually secretly hoping that we go beyond 4 of them, that this really does become a community of practice from which we can continue to learn and continue to volunteer what we have to bring to the table. So thank you. I appreciate everybody who's been able to join. I think there were some questions about the first recording, the recording of the first webinar, and then some real questions for our presenters today. And we promise we'll go figure out how to get both of those things done, because as Taj said, we really wanted to give our community stewards today ample time to talk about their work. So thank you very much to all the presenters and all the audience members as well.
thank you, Kat. So just for context for where we're going next in the discussion, now that you've had a chance to get somewhat of a deep dive into 4 different communities that have really powerful stories to tell about what happens when you listen to community and you trust community and you resource community and you invest in their big, bold visions that they hold for their future. The next conversation is really going to be about what's it going to take? What are the obstacles in our way? So as we were saying before, not having 20 communities who we could bring on to share this story, but 2,000. Like, how do we make this innovation and this progress something that's happening consistently everywhere that it needs to happen? So sort of what are the things that are in the way of that? And what are the things that we all need to do to help move the leap forward? So the next conversation is going to be less storytelling and more just creative problem solving together with the people who are at the leading edge of the innovation. So we're going to hopefully, some of the folks who you've heard from will agree to come back, and we'll maybe bring some other folks into the conversation, because the next conversation is all about making the leaps and what it's going to take to make the leaps. So thank you all, and thank you, Kat, for hosting us, and thanks to Harold and Regenesis Institute for also making this learning series possible. And again, the link to the resource page that's in the chat has everything you need to know and more. So blessings to all of you, and stay safe out there, and much love.